Blondtron, the performer, who is your performance persona, is now performing in the metaverse.
Yeah.
How did she get there?
Yeah. So this it was like kind of like my aha moment of how all of the code worked was that, I was trying to make this video and hanging out in these different random, very crude rooms, these very basic websites that some of the developers had made. And one of the rooms had a jukebox in it. I was like, why is there no music in these rooms? Right. And they're like, oh, we have a jukebox. And I went to the room with the jukebox, but like the JavaScript node loaded before the HTML. And I like started, and I was like, oh, the JavaScript is like the hand in the puppet, and then the HTML is like the puppet skin, and started to see the layers of things. And I thought, and I was currently making through this project called Amplify Her, a documentary that followed different female DJs and producers from the West Coast festival scene. They were helping us create our own comic story with these other really amazing animators and illustrators. And so in that story, I kind of created a Blondtron origin story, and in which she's this entertainment bot that's just sort of there to sort of get the party started and get people in the zone to party and provide the party, right? And so when we created the story world and I saw that she could live in a story world, I was like, what if I created a first version? Like, what would Blondtron like 1.0 look like and be? And because we had this shared virtual space that we could be in, I thought, okay, well, she could just, the JavaScript node can load inside a body. It doesn't need to be a dumb skin of a jukebox. Like, she can kind of be like a jukebox hula girl, of the metaverse. Like, just this like kind of iconic thing that could just be a piece of code and live in these spaces as an entertainment bot. And then I was like, oh, it'd be cool to connect, the different pieces of me on the internet, like the SoundCloud and the YouTube and like all the different profiles into one place and kind of have a representation. Because when I started to create versions of her in the metaverse, the first version we did, we like took a corpus of text, like everything I'd ever written in all my booking Gmails, everything I said on Facebook, like on Twitter, and like, oh, I just was like drunk my whole 20s. So it was like nonsense, a lot of it, but funny. And so I built this like really shitty chat bot that we put inside of her, and she'd like play music based off of the things that we had. You could say, hey, Blondtron, play house music, and she'd play her house list. But she'd also just say dumb shit back to you.
Yeah.
And it was like clearly stuff I'd like tweeted at one point, kind of haphazardly put together. But I had this really amazing experience where I was like, felt compassionate and light towards myself, and not critical in the way that you do when you're kind of scrolling a timeline or looking at old photos and being like, does this represent me now?
So cringy, old stuff for sure.
Yeah, so I realized when I saw her all together into a body, I think there's something that happens when you see a body too, because my dog Huxley, like does this really cute thing, like he'll see a mannequin and he'll like go up to it, like I guess like so disappointed as soon as he realizes it's like just a mannequin, and then he's like, oh, like this, I'm not gonna have a connection with this creature in board shorts, damn. And so it's like, I think that we have a physiological response the same way that my dog does to another body. And so seeing myself, especially like my past self, in a format that didn't make me cringe was interesting to me. And so that's sort of what like kept me going on, like trying, like it took me down a rabbit hole of identity, because in these worlds and in these spaces, you are just, because unless you connect like an email account or have something that manages your identity, when you go into these worlds, you're just a random avatar. Like it'll just be an anonymous kind of generated username. You can add overlays that will, you can add your name and stuff to it, but it really makes you think like, okay, who am I and who manages that, and how do I prove that? And that kind of like took me out of the sort of, I got really into the capturing of 3D spaces, but then that really like the Blondtron stuff and realizing how powerful it was to put that data as opposed to my environmental data, to put my data into a form that made me that really kind of stuck with me. And that's sort of why I've kept working on Blondtron on the side, even though I've been building a company that's focused on the physical environments and translating those into safer, more usable pieces of information. The personal human side is still like, it's equally as important. And so Blondtron is my way now of just continuously investing into this side of the future, which is like, how do we stay human? How do we not feel ashamed of our past? How do we give people, it's like an artist will create an album and then it's like, maybe they don't want to play that song again for 10 years. It's like, but their fans like make them. And it's like, we aren't, so much of us belongs to so many different people in so many different ways, and like vice versa for other people in our lives. Like if you really kind of can be dispassionate about it and look at what you're getting from each other and how much of a, that can be beautiful, but it can also be some sort of form of enslavement. And so how can you detach and free yourself from those personas without being like, I'm ashamed of it, or that's not me anymore, like
dropping it and running away from it.
Hide album, like
there's a lot of loss that goes on, right? Like
totally,
especially with the nature of the timeline. Even stuff that you would want to keep is lost kind of in the down in the feed forever.
Yeah, it's like we have Burning Man and people are like fine going and doing it at Burning Man, but it's just like kind of was like made me think that we could use these avatars and like layers of our personas to have these kind of digital Burning Mans where you're like, I'm archiving myself, I'm not with Nathan anymore. Okay, like we broke up and like this is the archive of me with Nathan, like look at my cute pink hair, like we were so happy, it's over. Like, do you know what I mean? Just because I think we're not very good at, especially like breakups or eras changing, but we're a part. If you look at the younger generation, and people are becoming so empathetic and self-aware, and sometimes I feel like a dinosaur with how coolly and like casually people wear their like super self-awareness and I, because I think for us, we grew up in this, like, you have to have a brand and stick to your brand kind of era of the internet. And that can feel super imprisoning. And so having this kind of maybe as a tool, like if people could make their own Blondtrons or their own bots or avatars even for artists, even if it could just be like, if Blondtron can be a piece of open source software where it's like, here's a place for you to connect all of your accounts into one place, and the format is a body because people are nicer to bodies than they are to squares. And maybe that's just that'll be her evolution. I don't know. For me, it was just like, how do I create my persona in a way and let her live on in a way that it feels good for myself and her fans, but doesn't completely keep us entwined as me as a person and her as a persona.
Yeah, it sounds, I know that you talked a lot, also previous to this conversation about like the archiving nature of the bot, like this is a place to like a storehouse for this past identity, but then it's also very cool the way that the nature of the metaverse and your ongoing ability to build within it means that you're also giving her this other life. So like while you are no longer necessarily her in the real world, that she doesn't stay only in the past for that. She gets to go off and like live this new life, which is really exciting.
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing. I'm like, maybe I'm just like super selfish and I like still want to like, I'm like, I don't know, like I still want to party with Blondtron. I just like also want to go to bed at 9,
Yeah.
And I like don't want people to think that I'm like, I'm boring now. Like I'm on I have a circadian rhythm and I'll party, but just like in my motion capture suit and then send it to you. I don't know.
It's just different now, yeah.
And honestly, I always like was DJing for like what I wanted to hear in the party I wanted to have, and it like I was always resentful that I couldn't experience it. It wasn't like I was like, I'm performing, here's me. I'm like, this is what I want to rave to right now, Yeah. And so like to be able to create an extension of her into like this performance that I can now experience too, is fun.